see a good number of people have joined in. So thank you for your patience. We started with a little delay, but I guess everybody is here now. Let me start with my introduction. So we're talking about the pathway to CISSP success, right? Who should pursue it? What are the strategies? That's what we're going to discuss here today. And my name is Sahaj Rai. I have over 2 decades of experience in the various industries, including financial, insurance, and so on. I've also been in positions of IT leadership positions in various leadership positions like CTO and VP IT, etc. I have been teaching and training for over 10 years now, over a decade, and been taught many participants, thousands of them. Many of them have become successful security experts, professionals, and I am an authorized instructor for several courses, including ISACA and IC2, and so on. And of course, the CISSP, which is part of IC2, which we're going to discuss here next. Okay, so let's quickly go over what to expect. So to introduce the course of CISSP, we need to understand ISC2, the International Information System Security Certification Consortium. And well, a couple of things I want you to know about ISC2 is that there was a branding exercise that happened recently. So previously, it used to be known as ISC Square, but now recently it's been branded as ISC2. Just make sure you kind of stick to this ISC2 rather than the ISC Square. Some of you may have heard about ISC Square before, but it's the ISC2. And this is the organization that is behind this particular course. They maintain something called the common body of knowledge. Now, you come across this term when you're studying in common body of knowledge, simply means the certificate. Sorry, it means the syllabus, the content that you need to, the knowledge that you need to gain in order to become certified. And so every course obviously has a list of knowledge that you are expected to know. And even for the CISSP, we'll go through that a little bit afterwards. They administer the exams, and ongoing accreditation is also their responsibility. Okay, so we'll talk about some of these more later on. And the website, isc2.org. Now, I'm sure many of you have visited this site, and this is the main site with all the information about the ISC2 as well as the CISSP exam. So what they do is they maintain the common body of knowledge, and in the sense that many of their courses, they refresh the course every 3 to 4 years, usually 3 years, which means the CISSP course that we're going to discuss here today is also refreshed. The syllabus has been refreshed this year, 2024. And when I say refresh, it doesn't mean it's a massive change. It's usually minor changes in terms of few topics added or focus in certain areas. So it's not a massive change. However, we need to be aware of the latest content, and all is better when you're preparing for the exam. But somebody is preparing with the older materials, and if you have the older books, that's also absolutely fine. No problem with that. The changes are generally about minor 5%, maximum 10% generally. So studying from the older materials wouldn't really make it's also absolutely fine. Okay, but it's important to refresh because as the cybersecurity landscape changes, the knowledge that one needs to gain also needs to be looked into. So they maintain this common body of knowledge, or in a sense, make sure that the person has the adequate knowledge to become certified in a certain area. Okay, so they have multiple certifications apart from the CISSP as well, and we'll probably talk about them briefly later on. And they help conduct the certification training and administer the certification exams. So these are some of the goals, and ensuring that the qualified certificate candidates, they're continuously learning, continuously growing. And we'll talk about the CPE a little later on, how we maintain these qualifications. So now the focus on the CISSP, the Certified Information System Security Professional, right? So let's understand what it is, who's it for, what are the study tips, and so on. What are the things you shouldn't be doing in order to become the CISSP. And by the way, I'll have a Q&A at the very end. So if you have any questions, you can make a note of that. Use a chat window to post those questions. If any question relevant to what I'm discussing right now, you can also put it on the chat window so that I can answer that. But any generic questions, you can answer, you can ask in the Q&A at the very end. Well, the CISSP is one of the most sought after certification course, and it's a gold standard, and more importantly, a vendor neutral certification. And this is important because then it doesn't matter in which industry, which technology you're using, the knowledge that you gain from the CISSP is valid across organization, big and small, any country, any technology, and usually this knowledge will last you forever. Okay, so it's an ANSI ISO ISA standard, which means that this certificate is valid throughout the world. In fact, the CISSP is considered to be equivalent to a master's level course in many countries. So it's a pretty advanced, it's very advanced course, as you can imagine, right? And quite recognized across the world. Now, who should earn the CISSP? That's a big question. And the question is, are you the one? Um, and it's for any information security expert who's responsible to either design, implement, and manage a best-in-class cybersecurity program. So if this is you today or you want to be this tomorrow, then this CISSP is for you. Okay. It's a managerial course. It's a managerial course, which means we're going to be focusing on the what and more importantly on the why and not so much on the how, because hows are generally vendor specific. And as I'll talk about this more a little later on, but again, if you are somebody who's going to be responsible for managing or designing or implementing the information security, then the CISSP is for you. Okay, and it could be it could be today or tomorrow. It's something you aspire to be a CISSP, aspire to be doing these things. Well, here are some of the roles that can earn the CISSP. Now, this is not an exhaustive role by any means, but somebody, like I said, very uh, has a broader understanding of security, is in the position to make the decisions or influence decisions, are the ones who will take the CISSP. Having said that, I have been teaching all various people from various background, including even freshers as well, freshers with little or no experience and gone ahead and passed the exam as well. Okay, but that's a different story. We'll talk about that more later on. But again, this is not an exhaustive list. I've had also taught a pre-sales team from various companies like Cisco and so on. And the reason they wanted to earn the certificate is so that when they go to talk about technology, let's say with the CIO or the CISO, they can understand their language, again, help them do better in their consulting. So we have various people taking the CISSP for various reasons. And this is one of the, like I said, the gold standard certificate that everybody aims to have. It's not an easy one, but certainly achievable. Okay. So just to give you an idea, the fresher that I talked about with very little experience went ahead and passed the exam. It's possible. Anyway, CISSP is not for everyone, and these are the list of some of the courses that somebody could consider. And I'll talk about the entry level certification later on. You can this is something we can probably start off with, but there are many other courses from the IC2, including the SSCP and the CCSP. CCSP is something which complements your the CISSP, and so this is for the cloud security professional. Okay, CGRC, and this is the sort of governance and risk compliant. This course is more relevant to somebody managing the risk management framework, especially the NIST risk management framework. The CSSLP is for secure software development. Again, somebody into that domain could benefit from this. Okay, so this can complement the CISSP. And there's a healthcare security and privacy as well at CISSP. And it's not mentioned here, but apart from the CISSP, now CISSP is, like I said, it's one of the milestone. Obviously, it's not the end, right? It's the milestone. And the question is, what beyond the CISSP? The CISSP is kind of gives you a very broad understanding of various topics, and it doesn't go into a lot of depth. So if you want that depth, then you can consider some concentrations from the IAC2, and let me show it to you. Hang on. They're called known as concentrations, and and so they focus on certain areas and give you a lot more depth that is kind of missing with the uh, CISSP. Let me just quickly show this to you. I hope this is visible. This is the ic2.org, and this is the certificate that I just talked about. And these are the three concentrations after CISSP. So you have to be a CISSP to take these. This is the security architecture. This is the engineering and security management. They focus on different aspects of the CISSP, but goes into a lot more in depth. What is missing with the CISSP? Okay, I've got a hand. Somebody's raising your hand. Yes, Naveen, do you like to? I'm not too sure. We can. You can put your hands question on the chat window. Yeah, you can put a question on the chat window. Okay. Can you see my screen now? I'm sharing my screen. Is it visible to everyone? My screen? Okay. Well, this numbers is a little old, but they have stopped publishing the members count. But you can the CISSP is a lot more than the others. So there's a refresh. I said there's a refresh in the CBK 2024, and the domains kind of remain the same. The details of the domain remain the same. The security and risk management is the first domain, a foundational domain that is that you need to understand, and concepts learned here will be applicable to other domains as well. Because risk management, for example, is relevant to every process that you do. Or asset security is relatively a smaller domain. We learn about asset security in terms of asset classification or the data life cycle. What are the various life cycle, and what are the controls needed uh, to protect the data or the assets at every life cycle phase, like when you create the data or when you store, when you use, archive, share, and so on, and finally destroy. As important, very important domain. One of the more difficult domain in the CISSP is the security architecture and engineering. And because not many people come from this background, and there are a lot of security design principles, security models, and architect concept that you need to learn, the new terms that you may have to learn here, including an entire course on the cryptography, as well as physical design as well. So making this one of the more difficult domain for most people. Personally, this is one of the more difficult domain for me as well. And again, it depends on every person's background. Okay. The next is communication and network security. This is a lot of technical domain in terms of the technical jargons like OSI layers, the TCP/IP models, right? The IPsec, and so on. So if you come from a networking background, if you have a CCNA course, this might be a easier domain. But if you're not from a networking domain, then this domain you'll have to learn a lot of basic networking concepts. And it's very important, as I think, for me personally, I come from a software development background, so got introduced to networking very late. And I did a CCN, and then I learned about networking and network security. But I've now realized it was very important, and I probably should have learned that much earlier in my career. Very important. Identity and access management. This is a relatively an easy domain around AAA, multi-factor authentication, single sign-ons, federations, and so on. Relatively an easy domain, but an important one. Access control is one of the primary control for any protecting any assets. So a lot of different concepts we need to learn here. Domain 6 about security assessment and testing. So this covers topics around audits, security audits, penetration testings, vulnerability assessments, and so on. And there are many other interesting topics you learn here to verify and validate your systems and the software and the program being used in the organization. So an important domain, not so difficult, but an important one. Domain 7 is security operations, ensuring that we have a resilient, smooth and resilient operations, right? So it's a little bulkish domain, a lot of concepts here, but it's not so difficult. So the things like we learn about things like incident management or change management, configuration management, okay, disaster recovery, physical security. So whatever those activities will do in order to have a smooth and resilient operations. Like I said, a little bulkish domain, but it's not so difficult. And finally, the software development security. Now, again, if you come from a software development background, like I do, it's usually a easy domain. But again, if you don't come from a software development background, and the question is, do you need to learn programming? And the answer is, well, not really. You don't have to learn about programming. This is a managerial course, so you need to be able to understand the best practices around software development, right? So understanding about the SDLC, DevOps, CICD, okay, and so on, Agile. So understanding these concepts and which one to use and when and why. So this is what we need to learn. You don't have to get into the how. How do we conduct Scrum meetings? That's not relevant in this course. It's more about the what and the why. Okay, so that's the overview of the CISSP domains that you will have to learn, and you can clearly see that it covers a broad range of topics. And in my experience of teaching for over a decade now, I have never come across any person who has experience in all these 8 domains. And even the exam or the IC2 expects you to have experience in at least 2 of these domains. Like not all 8, only 2. And usually a lot of people struggle with that also. And so which means you'll have your strengths, you'll have your weaknesses, and so you'll have to accordingly focus on those things. Okay, so let's say if you come from a software development background but not so strong with networking, or it could be vice versa. Some of you come from a VAPT background. So domain 6 is something that will be more easy for you. So like you said, every person will have their own pros and cons, and the strengths and weaknesses rather. And so you have to figure out what's your weaknesses and strengthen it, and accordingly ensure you meet this you are familiar with the CBK, the expectations from IC2. All right. So I hope my screen is visible. Okay. All right. So just to quickly, let me just share my screen one more time on the screen. Give me a moment. Yeah, I'm sharing this browser here, and this is the exam outline that I want all of you to go through. This is what all the details are here about the exam, what to expect, and they talk about all the various uh, detailed outline of the exam. So domain 1, these are the topics that you need to be familiar with. Okay, this is part of the CBK, as I mentioned before. So a lot of topics here, as you can see, including risk management and supply chain risk management and security awareness and so on. This is domain 2. As I mentioned, this is about asset classification, data lifecycle, having appropriate controls. Domain 3, about secure design principles, security models, and so on. So, security architecture design solutions, cryptography, and a little bit about the physical security as well, physical security design. So the details are all here as to what you need to study from the exam perspective. It's a lot of topics in detail. So when you're preparing for the exam, at least make sure that you check all of these points mentioned here. Okay. So there are certain changes. For example, the SASE wasn't there in the previous version. So they've added this secure access service edge as part of, also pronounced as SASE. Yeah, so these details are here. I'll obviously not be going through each and every topic here, but this is something which you'll have to go through, be familiar with these topics as you're preparing for the exam. So let's quickly discuss the next part, which is steps to certification. So what do you do? Well, obviously, meet the CISSP eligibility. Okay, you need 5 years of experience, full-time work experience. You this is assuming that you're prepared for the exam, right? And so you have to create an account with the Pearson VUE testing center and then you can do it online, and then schedule your exam. Exams are held at Pearson VUE testing centers, so you have to be in you can't take the exam online. You have to be present. And another thing about the Pearson VUE is there are not too many centers around the world. It's very limited. And I'm aware of people having to fly to a different state or to a different country in order to take the exam. So be aware of it. And you're going to pass the exam, of course. You're going to do well. And then comes the subscription process. You have to get it endorsed. You have to subscribe to the IC2 Code of Ethics, and there's an endorsement process. It's a very simple form. The idea here is that you need to prove your prove your experience. So you'll have to. There's a form on nowadays. Everything is online, so there's a form. You have to fill up all the details of your experience that you've had, and again, like I said, the eligibilities you need to have uh, experience in 2 or more domains, at least 5 years of full-time work experience in 2 or more domains, and this is where you need to prove. So you'd have to kind of submit your work experience certificate and get it endorsed by another IC2 member. And if you do not know any IC2 member, then you could just ask the IC2 to endorse you. Okay, that's a very simple process, so you don't have to worry about it. The interesting thing, and I just want you to quickly know about this, is called the CAT exam, the Computer Adaptive Test. So the CISSP has introduced the CAT exam. Now, when I took the exam many years back, it used to be a linear exam, 250 questions to be answered in 6 hours. Okay, just thinking about this was maddening. So what they've done now is they've used more of AI and machine learning to reduce the number of questions and ask fewer questions to understand the candidate's ability. So the CAT exam has been designed for that. So every question in the CAT exam will be matched to a candidate's ability. And we'll get a minimum of 100 questions. So at the end of 100 questions, okay, so going back one more time. So when I say candidate's ability, what happens is if you answer a question correctly, then it might ask you a little more difficult question. And so if you don't answer the question correctly, it might ask you a less difficult question to match your ability. So when I say difficulty, it's a very personal thing. Every person, what is difficult for you may not be difficult for me, and vice versa. And so the exam questions are going to be selected. It's not a pre-selected like in the linear exam. It's going to be selected based on how you answer the previous question. And the more difficult question, the more higher the score. The less difficult question, the lower the score. And so at the end of 100 questions, if you're above the passing grade, you pass the exam. If you're below the passing grade, then you fail the exam. But if the system is not very sure, it's not very certain whether you are above or below the passing grade, it could ask you additional 50 questions, within which time and anytime it's able to determine your ability, it's going to stop the exam. The exam will, which means that the exam will stop anywhere between 100 to 150 questions. 100 to between 100 to 150 questions, the exam will stop, and you will have, and this is, they're going to tell you whether you passed or failed the exam immediately. Okay, as you come out of the exam hall. And you have 3 hours for this, which means you have to be mentally prepared to take 150 questions in 3 hours. Okay, so 150 questions in 180 minutes, which is almost a minute, a little over a minute per question. And that's another thing you need to learn while preparing for the exam: time management. So how do I answer 150 questions in 3 hours? So that's something that you need to practice and have the mindset. Anyway, that's something we'll discuss later on. Yeah, so again, the mark for review is not available because obviously every question is selected based on the previous question. The question formats hasn't changed, so mostly multiple choice questions with 4 options and one correct answer. The passing standard, everything remains the same. It's just that mark for review is not available. Exam fee, well, $749. I think that's the latest exam fee. It's a pretty expensive one, and you want to make sure you do not you do well. You don't want to fail the exam, right? And once you pass the exam, you got to maintain the CISSP certification, and that's what I meant by the continued education point. Earlier on, I mentioned this. So you have to recertify every 3 years, and for that, there are two things we need to do. We need to pay an annual maintenance fee of $125. Every year you pay $125. Well, it's a lot of money, of course, but the good news is that the IC2 doesn't charge you extra for every certificate. So if for $125, it doesn't matter how many certificates you have, you only pay $125. And also you need to earn the continuing professional education points. And there are many ways to earn the CPE points. It's very similar to PDUs in the PMPs. For example, you watch a webinar of 1 hour or 50 minutes, that you can earn a CPE of 1 point. Or you take a 40 hours of training sessions, that's a 40 CPE, and you can minus the breaks, so it may become around 35, 36 hours. So you can claim those hours towards your CPE. And you got to earn about 120 CPEs over 3 years, which means 40 CPEs in a year, which means 40 hours of self-learning in a year, which is I don't think it's a big ask. And there are lots of activities you could do to earn the CPEs, and there's a whole long list of activities. For me, I teach, I create content, and of course, I take a lot of exams as well. So those are enough CPEs for me, right? And you could do certain things. You can attend webinars, or teach a class, or write a security content. Or there's so many activities you could do. You take a certificate exam. All of these you can earn the CPE points. There's a long list of activities you can do. This is after you pass the exam, so not now. Well, this is interesting. How are you going to fail the CISSP exams? What are the things you should avoid? And this is it's come from my experience of having met people who come to me saying, "Hey, I've kind of done this 5,000 questions, practiced them, I still failed the exam, and so why?" Well, and so I asked them a question. So, okay, you've done 5,000 questions. So tell me the difference between, let's say, least privilege or need to know. Can you help me understand that? Or do you care due diligence? And so on, right? So the very fundamental concept. And what I realize is that most of them have just crammed those knowledge rather than understanding what the actual meaning or the usage of that concept is. And that's why people fail. One of the main reasons, the cram. There are many certification exams where you can cram. There are dumps, you can find those, and you can pass the exam without any knowledge. But CISSP is not one of those. You have to understand the concept. You have to be able to apply these concepts in various scenarios. And the cram is not going to help you. And the study from practice test, that's what I was saying. So you do not use the practice test to study. You use the practice test to validate your knowledge, to test your knowledge. There's a difference. You study from the notes, study from the book, and use the practice test to validate, verify your knowledge. But if you just focus on practice test and dumps and hope these questions are going to give you in the exam, the answer is no. The questions they do not repeat these questions. Study aimlessly. Again, have a plan. Okay, so for example, give you simple breakup. Let's suppose you have 8 domains, right? 8 domains. So break it down into one domain, and if let's say you have one domain per week, okay, how many hours you need to cover that? So you plan that out. And so if you don't do that, if you don't have a plan, then obviously you're not gonna do well. So have a plan, have a regular study, and you can use lots of reference materials. I'll talk about that in a moment. And yeah, didn't read the question carefully. That's another reason why people don't do well. And you have to understand the question. Many times you don't understand a question. What is the sin? What is the exam wants the wants to test your knowledge on? Okay, so usually the one of the last line is they're gonna question like there may be a question like what's the most important, or what's the next thing you're going to do, or the first thing you're going to do, or the least important, and so on. Now, the CISSP exam, it's a managerial exam, like I said, and many times we are not looking for the correct answers. What you're looking for is the best answer. So you could have multiple correct answers, but the question is, which is the best answer? And for that, you have to, like I said, understand the concept. You have to read the question and carefully and understand what the question wants is to, what is it testing you on. And so, okay, let's move on to how to prepare. So we've learned how what not to do. Okay, so have a study plan. Like I said, break it down. Maybe join a group, weekly plan. So and break it down into every day. So this is how many hours I'm going to study, morning, evening, whatever it is. It's not easy, but you have to study every day. Understand the concept. Like I said, do not cram, memorize. Understand, because you have to be able to apply these concepts in various scenarios. You understand, let's say, a SOD in place, but and you should be able to look at different aspects and see, oh, this is what an SOD looks like in this particular scenario. Using multiple study materials. So what I recommend is there is no single book or single trainer who has all the knowledge. Okay, or the exam's going to ask you from a single book. So what I generally recommend is use one primary book, okay, which you're going to study end to end, and several other reference materials. Okay, there are really good candidates for the primary book. There are official, if you take an official training from IC2, then you go to the official book. Or there are books from Sean Harris or Cybex materials, which are pretty good and could be used as a primary material. And you could use the others as references. So when I say references, you're going to study only certain portions, maybe do some of the quiz from those books, but not the entire book, because the each book is usually well, over 1,000 or over 1,000 or 2,000 pages. You can't literally study all the book. So one primary book and multiple resources to further supplement your knowledge. Just always do that. Always do that. And like I said, no single author, no single book covers all the topic from the CISSP perspective. And as I said, again, the same thing, understand the question. Okay, what is it asking you? Okay, focus on the understanding the question. And these are things which you'll obviously practice. And another thing I want to add here is iterative study. Okay, you have to study. It's an iterative study. You have to study over and over again. And so what happens is at the end of domain one, and you start domain two. So at point in time, just go back and study what domain one briefly and see, okay, I remember these terms, right? So otherwise you keep forgetting it. There are a lot of terms, RPOs, RTOs, MTDs, and so on, which you may have heard before. So going back and studying that over and over again is the only way to retain that long-term knowledge. What resources to use? As I mentioned, use books. Like I said, primary book, reference materials, lots of them out there. Okay. Make your study notes. Make your study notes. You could use, and a lot of people use mind maps. I like mind maps, but it's up to you what you want to use. When you write it down yourself, that kind of that notes get retained into your long-term brains, okay, memory. So make notes. And what happens is that towards the end of the exam, when you're preparing for the exam, you are not studying the entire book, the 2,000 pages book. You're looking at the notes and so, okay, look at these things. Do I understand? Do I understand what is due care, due diligence? Do I understand the data lifecycle phases? Do I understand what is DLP, IRM? So look at those notes. Okay, prepare your notes. There are lots of notes available, and you can always supplement those with yours. And do practice the test. So, as I said, use this to verify your knowledge. And I remember when I was taking that 6 hours exam, I took a couple of practice exam only for time management, and it's a great way to know how you're progressing towards your to the exam. So if you're consistently scoring, let's say about 70%, well, that's a good indicator that you're doing well. If anything less than 70% consistently, then you probably need to study more and do the practice test one more time. So 70 is I would say, that line that you should maintain, and anything above that is absolutely good. Okay, and it's okay. Nobody's going to score 100%. Okay, so let's say you take 10 questions at a time, and you practice that, and you score consistently seven and above on an average, then you are on the right track. This is one example of a mind map. So you can lots of tools around, the lots of mind maps around. You can use them to make your own notes. Yeah. So remember that as I mentioned before, the CISSP is a mile wide and an inch deep. That's a saying. And what it simply means is that's a lot of knowledge, a lot of things you need to learn, making it one of the more difficult exam. And that's why it's one of the more difficult exams. There are 8 domains, and there are lots of topics in it, and including the physical security and IoTs and all sorts of things. And the good news, like I said, is that it's not so much in depth. Otherwise, you'd be spending 1 year to prepare for the exam, or more than that. But then, as I mentioned, there are concentrations after the CISSP, where you can do those more deep dive into certain sections of the CISSP topics. Okay. And as I also mentioned, it's a managerial exam. So you have to think like a manager and manager. So during the trainings as an instructor, this is what I will help you think like a manager. If you're already in managerial positions, well, excellent. So you would probably have some idea about what managers do. Okay. Thinking about the business to begin with. Okay. To be able to make the right decisions. And this is what the exam is going to be like. As like I said, so we're not looking for the correct answer. Okay. We're looking for the best answer. And the managers have to make these decisions all every day, looking at all the scenarios and say, okay, based on the uh, based on the information that I have, this is the best course of action. I could do this, but this seems to be the best action. So for that, you need to understand the concepts, and then, like I said, be able to apply them in that particular scenario. So thinking like a manager is a very important aspect of becoming a CISSP. Okay. So I guess we are left about 5 minutes or so, and we could probably do a Q&A. I don't know if there's any Q&A. Yeah, so let's do that. Okay, you can put your questions on the on the chat window, or the mic if the mic is working. I'm happy to address on the mic as well. Okay, the Naveen says, is this session about the certification? Are we going to have future sessions related to the CSS syllabus? Yes, I think the plan is to hold the training in the near future. How's the industry demand for CISSP? Do we need to be CISSP certified to get a job as a security architect? And I think the simple answer could be you go to a job portal and search for the CISSP, and you probably have your answer out there because this is one of those most recognized certificates. There's another one, CISM from ISACA, which kind of complements the CISSP. That's something you can consider as well. But like I said, the CISSP is in huge demand. It's been there. It's been there since the 90s. It's almost 30 years now. In fact, 1994 was the first time the CISSP exam was held. So it's 30 years, I think. So it's one of the certificate in demand. Yes. So if you have a CISSP, then you are in a different league in terms of the knowledge and the experience that you might have. But again, is this the only certificate you should have? The answer is no. Please supplement with this course with other certificates as well, like the CISM or the CRISC, CCSP, depending on your career, of course. But the CISSP is a more generic certificate that a particular security professional should have. But then if you are into, let's say, auditing, maybe CISA. If you're into, let's say, risk management, maybe CRISC or CGRC. If you're into software development, maybe CSSLP. If you're into cloud security, then CCSP. So supplement these. And also, like I keep saying, do not study for today, but prepare always study for tomorrow. So do you have those knowledge? And when the opportunity comes knocking on the door, do you have the certificate on the and the knowledge to take on that opportunity? Right. Any other questions? Use the mic. You can use the chat window. So one of the things I also recommend is the CISSP is a fairly advanced course, right? And if you're transitioning to ID security, I wouldn't recommend the CISSP as the first certification course. I would want you to probably build your foundation with a course like a Security Plus, which gives you, again, very solid foundational knowledge. Because at the CISSP level, you're expected to kind of have some of these the foundation knowledge which is not going to be covered there. For example, we're not going to be teaching you what is social engineering attacks or what is a virus or a worm and so on, right? So so that's something which I recommend to take on something like a Security Plus course material to solidify your knowledge. All is better because then you also get a little bit of hands-on, and so you see what's going on. What do I mean by this particular concept? What the firewall and so on. The CISSP is a more advanced managerial, no hands-on, focusing on the broader concepts of the what and the why. So uh, and so always that's always something that you should aim forward. And like I said, I have taught people from various backgrounds, application support experience as a manager. So we already have a managerial role there, and you're dealing with application support and application security. So that should make it easy for you to move. But having said that, you may want to supplement your knowledge by having some of the other foundational certificate as well. I'm a software developer, and from application perspective, we write defensive coding, best practices for application code security. If I take a CSSC, will I have only the bookish knowledge and the other areas IT infrastructure? So will the organization will be okay to offer career with it, just the certificate? Uh, yeah, so this is more of a like I said, a managerial exam. So it's not gonna get into the details of, uh, let's say a CSRF or server-side security attack and so on. It's not going to get into those details, right? And so there might be some specific courses for software development security that you might want to take up. Like, for example, the CSSLP may be more relevant for you as a software developer, but the CISSP is a broader, more broader certificate that anybody could have. And if you want more focus on the software development, then CSSLP might be more relevant. Or maybe there's some other courses that you can probably consider from other vendors as well. So no labs. These are, like I keep saying, managerial exams. Okay. Mostly there are no practical, no only theory that what are the things you need to do? How do you make those decisions? And that says I have knowledge of IT infrastructure, software development, network IT, SM audit and change. Yeah, that's a good one. So the more knowledge you have, all is better, right? I've been working in cloud security. Is it advised to do a CCSP and then later do the CSSP? Yeah, maybe. I think in terms of the, just give me just a moment. So it might be a good idea to take the CCSP, relatively easy CCSP compared to the CISSP, and then consider the CISSP later on, or vice versa. Vice versa. For me, I took the CISSP and did the CCSP, and it's up to you whatever you want to do. But relatively, CISSP is relatively a little difficult domain. CCSP is also an advanced course. It's also difficult, but the CSS is a little more difficult. Anyone else? Any other questions? Keep putting a question on the chat window or use the mic. So whenever there is whenever you're hiring a person, there are a couple of things you look into. Mainly, one, the first level is, does this person have the required knowledge, right? So one of the things that we do, like, I mean, if I was hiring somebody, is look at their qualification, experience, and so on. And if I see something like a CISSP on your resume, that might be the first level of screening, right? So I might want to have somebody who is a CISSP, because that having that certificate shows that the person has the knowledge, the experience, and of course the dedication to take that exam, to have that exam certificate. So that's the first level of screening that I might want to have. The second is then an interview, and if I'm speaking to somebody who is a CISSP, I'll probably have that knowledge and be able to address my queries during the interview. Yeah, like I said, it doesn't matter which role that you're in at the moment, but it's always always people always find opportunities. So I started off as a software developer, but later on became CTO, VP IT, and so on. So opportunities will come in, and I became a became a CTO at a company after I got the CISSP. That was one of my I would say yeah, one of the good thing out of the CISSP. Immediately I got an opportunity. All right. Any other questions? Right. If no further questions, we could end the session. And I'm still going to wait for a couple of minutes. But if you want to leave, you're most welcome to do so. Yeah. Thank you so much for attending the session. There is a feedback link. Love to hear your feedback. Please click on that link. Thank you very much. Yep, thank you. Okay, there's a question. Which training materials do you recommend? As I mentioned, there are a lot of training materials out there, and well, as I mentioned, use one primary book and multiple reference materials. Okay, so so if you're taking a official training from ISC2, you get an official material. That's a good one. Otherwise, you can purchase something like from Cybex or the Sean Harris material. These are really good. And not I'm not saying the others are bad. I'm saying that you can pick any one book. All of them have the same topics. They're not going to teach something very different, right? They cover the same CVK. It's just that one author way of explaining a particular topic may be different than the other. And so one book, primary book that you study end to end, and then you can use other reference material. For example, you select Cybex as the primary book, you can use Sean Harris as a reference, or vice versa. So it's up to you, whatever you want to use. All these books are good. It depends on your style of learning. For example, um, the Sean Harris books is very detailed, a lot of examples, almost 2,000 pages. Some people prefer that, some may not prefer that. So it's up to you. All right. Thank you so much for your questions and your participation. Hope to see you in the future. All the best.